Blizzard says your tier set bonuses of the first season of the War Within are going to be your hero talents. Yeah, that's the TLDR of the announcement of Blizzard right as the beta of the War Within has gone live, and we were able to data mine the tier sets of the next expansion. Something was very clear quite quickly, which is this is a bunch of boring passive damage or healing bonuses, not very creative for a tier set. So Blizzard has specified that they are aiming for relatively simple bonuses to let the hero talents breathe as the primary focus for the War Within Season 1. They want the tier sets to have minimal impact on the talent selection as well as the choice of your hero talents, because maybe, you develop a particular tier set which fits very well with a particular hero talent, which means for the entire season that particular spec plays only that hero talent and not the other, right? So the TLDR is that the tier sets already data mined for the first season are very boring. So these are the tier sets, for example, for a DK. You will find damage increases to be the standard. For example, Frost has 8% damage increase for runic spending abilities, and Unholy has 8% more damage for the minion in the 2-piece set bonus. The 4-piece set bonus of Frost is basically one of their older weapon enchants, basically Crusader, as a 4-piece set bonus, and for Unholy DK you have a Stuck in Haste buff up to 8% when summoning a minion. Tanks do get some generic damage reduction. Pretty much all of the tanks are getting 3% damage reduction in their 2-piece set bonus, which is quite simple and straightforward. Funnily enough, the one tank that doesn't get any damage reduction is Vengeance, who doesn't get any DR from its tier set. Havoc Demon Hunter does get one of the more rotation changing tier sets, which is going to be a rarity in these season 1 tier sets, because the 4-piece set bonus after the 2-piece is just a basic damage increase is Chaos Strike having a chance to reset the cooldown of Blade Dance. This is very good. Your Chaos Strike already has chances to multi-hit, so more chances to reset the cooldown of Blade Dance. Blade Dance is used in AoE, so you do get more value in your AoE damage with this tier set, for example, for Havoc Demon Hunter. You have basic flat damage increase on the 2-piece of Balance, crit chance increase on the 2-piece of Feral, the mandatory 3% damage reduction for a tank for Guardian, and again flat healing increase in the 2-piece of Restoration Druid. Another passive effect which is not going to impact your hero talents too much is the basic Wrath generation increase of your generators for Balanced Druid. Amongst the better tier sets you still have Feral, because this further synergizes with your crit. Unfortunately, these type of tier sets are usually at their strongest at the end of an expansion, because at the beginning of an expansion you start with 10, maybe 15% crit, whereas right now, for example, you can have upwards of 40 or 45% crit, which means a tier set like this one, your crit strikes with your combo point generating abilities, increasing the damage of your next Ferocious Bite and Rampant Ferocity or Primal Wrath, etc., would have gotten more value with higher crits and higher item level deeper into an expansion. We do have some pretty funny additions to Evoker, because Augmentation Evoker does get something that they have been nerfed about for like 7 times. Ebon Might increases the primary stats by an additional 0.4% every 2 seconds, up to 2%. This would still be nerfed. It will still be one of the many nerfed versions of Ebon Might. No surprise, you have more flat buffs for Devastation, 10% more damage to Disintegrate and 10% more damage to Pyre. Extra passive basic healing with Evoker, both for Reversion and Emerald Blossom, to cover both of the builds that Preservation Evoker can go for. This is a pretty nice effect depending on how long this buff is going to last, to get your next Reversion buffed by 200%. If this buff generated by Verdant Embrace lasts at least 15 seconds, you can do your Temporal Anomaly, 4 or 5 echoes into Temporal Anomaly, and then use all of those echoes with this empowered Reversion, which is pretty nice. Hunter is, not a surprise, the simplest out of all of the classes in terms of flat passive effects. BM Hunter gets more attack speed on their pets with Barb Shot, and your pet's attack having a chance to give 10% pet damage. BM Hunter, flat damage increase to abilities you barely even use, as well as passive damage increase to Aim Shot whenever you gain and consume precise shots, and then Survival, flat damage increase to Wildfire Bomb and your single target strike, dealing more damage to targets affected by Wildfire Bomb, which means basically all the time. We have more passive damage increases, Arcane Blast and Arcane Explosion for Arcane, Phoenix Flames for Fire, and Ice Lance for Frost. Frost does get some more cool things compared to Arcane and Fire. Arcane has a chance to gain 4 Arcane charges and deal more damage with Arcane Barrage. Fire can get a 6% damage increase, but for Frost, Fingers of Frost increases the damage of your next Frozen Orb by 10%, stacking up 10 times, which means you can double the damage of Frozen Orb. That is at least some extra effect, rather than being some passive, boring, default damage increase. Mandatory, as mentioned, mandatory 3% damage reduction given to a tank, given to Brewmaster, more damage to Keg Smash, which is very good for Brewmaster, as well as using Blackout Kick now gives you a chance to reset the cooldown of Keg Smash and making it cost no energy. This is very good for the extra damage of Brewmaster Monk, and also additional defensiveness, because more Keg Smashes means more resets of the cooldown of Breath of Fire and also more CDR on your defensive brews. Pretty useless 4-piece set bonus for Mistweaver, extending the duration of 2 up to 4 seconds of Renewing Mist. What you want for Mistweaver is to extend the duration of all Renewing Mists on all targets when you use your Vivify spam. That's because, for those who don't play Mistweaver, you want to do this with Invigorating Mists so you can splash Vivify to all targets with Renewing Mist. So even extending Renewing Mist on your main target doesn't really help if Renewing Mist on the other targets is expiring. Holy Paladin was in a pretty obvious situation, because you're like, okay, Blizzard continues to try to split this talent tree, giving you some talents for the melee version of the build with Crusader Strike, Judgment, Hammer of Wrath. They even giga buffed compared to its nerfed version. They buffed Avenging Crusader now, a 1-minute cooldown. It has a whole bunch of buffs given to it to make it much stronger. So how can you make a tier set that works for both the ranged, Holy Light, Flash of Light type of Paladin and the melee version? Well, you make it work by using the thing they both use, which is Holy Shock. Not just buffing Holy Shock, but also making Holy Shock buff your spenders. Spenders which have just gotten buffed in this last reset, and now in the first season of The War Within can be buffed up to being 32% stronger, which still makes them somewhat weak, but we are almost getting there for Holy Paladin in terms of making your 2 spenders, Word of Glory and Light of Dawn, actually worthwhile to use. Again, no surprise, the tank gets its mandatory 3% damage reduction with the 2-piece set bonus. Now, this is interesting though. Casting a Holy Power ability increases the damage and healing you deal during your next wings by 0.5% stacking. So, how much can this stack? How often can you get this to stack? Will be interesting, but looks like at least a different type of 4-piece set bonus compared to the boredom of most others. Talking about boredom of most others, here is Ret. Flat damage increase to Blade of Justice and Wake of Ashes, as well as flat damage increase to all of your abilities after you use Wake of Ashes. Very, very simple, not really going to impact too much your choice of hero talents with this set of tier bonuses. Priest does have some cool and interesting ones to change your playstyle a little bit, especially Shadow. Not really the 1 second longer Devouring Plague, but the 4-piece set bonus. Devouring Plague increases your damage by 2%, stacking up to however many times you get to use Devouring Plague. This is cool because it does favor you pooling Insanity now. Now your playstyle would want to be to get to max Insanity and then dump it all at once with Devouring Plagues, because you will be getting 2, 4, 6, 8, 10% more damage. So it does add a little bit more flavor and perhaps complexity to how you want to play Shadow Priest. The two healing specs do get some flat increase, Atonement for Discipline and your cooldown reduction of Holy Words for Holy Priest. This is quite terrible. Here is a run-of-the-mill illustration of the Discipline Priest ramp. You see that you start your damage window with Mind Blast, now that Schism has been cooked into Mind Blast, and then you do your damage. So where do you use the 3 smites to buff the damage of Mind Blast by 75%? You can't use them before here because it's too tight, your GCDs are too tight to allow you 3.5 seconds of smite spams, and you can't use them before the ramp because you are gonna be wasting those buffs in these Power War shields. So this is pretty wonky for Discipline as a tier set. For Holy Priest though, it's much better. Your 2 single target heals and Prayer of Healing have a 50% chance to double cast at 35% effectiveness. This is very good. It's very good because as a Holy Priest you do have Serendipity, which means heal, Flesh Heal, and Prayer of Healing reduce the cooldown of your Holy Words. You can then take something like Light of the Naru to make the CDR even stronger. You already have the 10% buff on how effective it is going to be from your 2-piece, as well as you are now able to take things like Revitalizing Prayers, Prayer of Healing having a chance to apply Renew on allies it heals, and now it has a double chance whenever your 4-piece procs. So it's a nice extra addition to the value Priest can get from its abilities. Talking about a reasonably minor, you have the damage increase to your poisons based on whenever your bleeds do damage, and then with the 4-piece set bonus, if you have 5 more of these stacks of Vile Tincture, your bleeds now will do 10% more damage. The one triggering thing about this set bonus, which I'm expecting this to change very quickly, is the fact that it only lasts 8 seconds. This is a banned duration for a buff for Mythic Plus. 8 seconds is not large enough for you to comfortably move from one pack to the next or from one boss to the next pack without fearing this buff dropping off. So this should be a bit longer for better use in Mythic Plus. The rest is more basic passive damages. Your Sinister Strike, Pistol Shot and Ambush have a 20% chance to do 15% increased damage, and then this increased damage increases the damage of your next Between the Eyes by 6%, stacking up 3 times. Even simpler are the bonuses for Subtlety. Symbols of Death increases the damage of your next Secret Technique, and then using Secret Technique increases the damage of your next other finishing moves. That's it, quite straightforward. Half good, half bad tier for Elemental. You have 25% more damage to your single target and AoE spenders, which is good because spenders being valuable has been a problem for Elemental. A little bit less good having 5% more critical strike chance, since the value of crit is kinda weird for Elemental, since your Lava Burst already has guaranteed crit, so you don't get nearly as much value from that stat. I guess we already know what Enhancement Shaman wants to prioritize in the next expansion, because after the basic 15% damage increase of these abilities, now you have Feral Spirits lasting twice as long. So you already know you are going to be going down this line of buffing your Feral Spirits, given that now they literally have twice the duration. Basically, they are twice as strong now, so pretty easy take. Not nearly as good are the buffs to Restoration. Tidal Waves increases the healing of the spells you use Tidal Waves with by 10%, and then Tidal Waves is 80% more effective and reduces the mana cost of the spells by 8%. This is slightly bad because the effect of Tidal Waves for the non-shamans is that it reduces the cast time of your next chain heal in particular by 20%. This is not nearly as good to have it buffed by 80% and become a 36% faster chain heal cast, because you already have multiple ways to giga speed up your chain heal casts, in particular starting with Tidebringer, which can reduce it by a whole lot. And then if you play what looks to be a very powerful hero talent for Restoration Shaman, Totemic, you have the buff where whenever you place down Totemic, which is what replaces your Healing Tide, which by the way has already been nerfed, used to have a 20-second cooldown, now it's up to 30 seconds, but when you place this down you gain a bunch of modes you are going to be spending with your abilities, and one of them, Air Mode, says the cast time of your next healing spell is reduced by 40%. So this is kind of okay. This is better to buff chain heal healing by 10%, and also this part is better to discount the mana of chain heal by 8%. I'm sorry, Affliction Warlocks, you still have Malefic Rupture in your rotation, damage increased by 5% and crit chance increased by 10%, and also Malefic Rupture has a chance to increase damage dealt by your Agony, Corruption and Unstable Affliction by 15%. For demo, your primary demons deal 5% more damage and your Shadowbolt damage is increased by 50%. This looks massive if it wasn't for the fact that Shadowbolt hits like a wet noodle. Shadowbolt has a chance to enrage your primary Felguard, increasing the damage of their next Legion Strike by 300%. For Destro, the damage increase goes to Incinerate, and the critical chance increase goes to Conflagrate, and then when Conflagrate crits, your fire damage is increased by 5% for 6 seconds. For Warriors, you have Mortal Strike and Cleave, increasing the damage of your next Overpower by 10%, Bloodthirst increases the damage of your next Rampage by 10%, and for the 4-piece, when Overpower has its cooldown reset by Tactician, your next Mortal Strike or Cleave has its damage increased by 10% and critical strike chance increased by 10%, up to 2 times. For Fury, when Raging Blow resets its cooldown, the damage of your next Bloodthirst is increased by 10%, stacking up 2 times. They literally copy-pasted these 2 tier sets and just swapped the main abilities of the 2 specs. For Prot Warrior is practically the same of the 4-piece of the 2 DPS specs. When you have a reset of Shield Slam, your Shield Slam damage is increased by 5% and you reduce, of course, mandatory 3% damage reduction for a tank. The 4-piece for Prot is that Shield Slam critical strikes increase the damage dealt by Thunderclap and Revenge by 10%. So, as we have gone through all of these tier sets, the intent of the Blizzard's manifesto, the statement on their tier set is quite clear. They don't want to have that many powerful tier sets that might go and impact how valuable all of these hero talents for all of these, different specs might be. So they give you some, yes, boring and passive bonuses so that you can play around and decide the choices of your hero talents based on how good the hero talents are rather than how good the tier sets are. This is likely going to benefit the balancing of the hero talents better, because it's going to be harder, to know which one of these for Fire Mage is better. Number one, if the tier sets are clearly valuing Frostfire more than Sun Fury, and number two, if because of that 99% of the data, 99% of the players playing Fire are playing Frostfire. So being able to gauge how powerful Sun Fury is going to be quite tough if you have some massively skewing tier set in terms of power level. So this was the recap of all of the tier sets announced so far. Of course, no doubt, as we go by the weeks and even the months before the release of the expansion, many of these will be adjusted, changed, modified, but for now these have been the first draft, the first take on the tier sets for the first season of The War Within. So with this out of the way, we are now leaving each other on this Thursday. Thanks of course to all the dear supporters who can still continue to support for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching, see you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, well, I guess I jinxed it. I wanted not to become too hot before July. We are already in pretty dangerous territory right now.